solidified. Should we just maybe, is that okay? What if we open the blind behind you and then turn these lights off? Actually let sunlight in. No? Okay, too risky. Really no response from the team there. What? All right, so we got to this needs to be toggled, sorry. It's on the wrong one. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So clock that lies. Okay, so we'll go to 1 hour. All right. Yep. Okay, so we did this. We got this guy. Pretty cool. Fun. Boom. So here's another example. This is, so you can go berserk, obviously. So recovery rate of 1. That's what we're restricting ourselves to. This is where you have to have a threshold of 3. Where people have a threshold of 3, so they need 3 hits out of their last 12. So this obviously moves this a lot. So this was an easy little one to solve. This is also solvable. You can see the solution is here. The circles are from simulations. And again, this is the possible future, right? If you start in any, so you could start at any point here. So you have some. This is the system, how it's tuned at the moment. P is the infection probability. This is your initial condition. You could think of it as your initial condition to start with, but these are the fixed points that you'll arrive at, right? So you'll anywhere here, you go to 0. If you're up here, you drop down to here. Anywhere in here, you go up. Right? So if you're marching across here, there's a big break. So if for some reason your system, you could dial P, you'd be here, right? And you'd be kind of dropping down, the things are changing, but if you dial P off a little more here, it goes, so it's an abrupt phase transition. But as you dial P around here, if it's close to, if the thing is at 0, you can dial P all over the place, it will never take off, right? Never takes off. Groovy. Okay, so this is to compare a whole bunch. So this is T equals 24, so a bigger memory. But thresholds of 1 up to 23. Threshold of 24 is absurd. But this is crazy town banana pants. But it's so this is the D equals 1 case. That gave us the SIR type phase transition model. And then all of the others are the saddle point, saddle node bifurcations. And it's hard to see, but this guy here, there's a little gap still, right? So this isn't hitting this line. I mean, this is a very interesting thing. Right? If this hit this line, it would change stability, and there might be some other things going on, but it's not. And it shrinks, right? So as we require more and more of the memory to have infection in it, then our saddle node moves, and you can track the point of it. Right? You can get an equation for that, and that's when you have 23. So there's a tiny little thing up here. 24, you need basically everyone all the time. But there's a jump in universality type class, right? Type behavior. There's a very different kind of phase bifurcation to these guys. Cool beansters. So a lot of fun. Okay, so yeah, so that's trying to say it looks like it might, but it doesn't hit phi star equals 0. So this curve here does not hit this line. So they are either pure phase transition type 1s or pure critical mass 1s, right? And it matters tremendously. Of course, if you are in this mode, you could go out, if you knew you were here for some reason, it's pretty infectious. I mean, these are all along here, it's a pretty infectious kind of thing. If you knew this was kind of your system, you could go out and, get some people to join your team, right? Through whatever methods, right? Pay them money, tell them lies, whatever it is, right? And get them to jump on. Okay. So, all right. So we get either. There's nothing in between. But is there? Okay. All right. All right. Lots of madness. These are where the bifurcation points are. We just saw the This is truly insane. This is t equals 24. This is where they were located as we went through different thresholds. D star, right? Yep. And of course, they have their own, they have critical phase transition points here when D star equals 1. But this is just to give you a sense of how things move. So when it's 96, you get a sharper kind of thing, but it fills up the whole thing. Right, okay. Okay? So it makes sense, right? The longer your memory, for the same P, you have a better chance of having 2 hits or 3 hits or whatever you need. Yeah. And of course, once you get to 3, then you know, there's no, it's a different game, right? So you can only have a certain amount of hits. That thing shouldn't be there. Okay. So I got rid of it. Oh, okay. It used to be fun, but I think it's dead. It's supposed to be a nice little break for us, but it doesn't work anymore. So yeah, you could look at which things connect to which on Amazon. Good fun. Okay. Let's try this. Okay. So this was all for r equals 1, right? So we were able to move out to these these complicated ones with d star greater than 1 for r less than 1, for r equals 1. Yeah, r equals 1, d star greater than 1, and then different kinds of memories. Okay. Yes. Now we have to think about it. So let's think. So you know, we've been building this story out. So hopefully we can kind of grasp this, and I can try to convey what might be in my head. Let's see. So we need. Okay. So r is less than 1. So now, as soon as your threshold, as soon as your dose load drops below your threshold, now you have a chance. Okay. And we were able to solve this in a simple case before. Yeah. So really, what we have are these partially summed random walks, right? So we have this is just the original thing. So this is our first equation really. This is the sum of our doses, right, for the last t, capital T time steps. And this is the sort of thing that might happen. So it's in an equilibrium situation. You've got a memory of 24, right? So time is going this way, and you're remembering the last 24. And here you have a threshold of 14. And so at each point, it's your dose, right? So it's the sum of the last 14. So your real memory is 1s and 0s, right? 1s and 0s, 1s and 0s. And then this is this partial sum of that random walk. So you know, a true random walk is, you can imagine -1s and 1s, and you're summing it, right? So the -1s and 1s, you just have -1s and 1s. They're your coin flips. And a true random walk is then, in fact, just the sum of that as it goes along, right? So random walk, good stuff. But now you have a random walk with some forgetting, right? So it's forgetting after the last, in this case, t equals 24. It just remembers that much. So it's sort of it's a sliding window on coin flips. They're biased, right? And for a stable, when the system's stable, the chance of getting a 1 is phi star, and p times phi star, and the chance of getting a 0 is 1 minus p phi star. All right, so we have to think about, all right, so this person is infected for sure here. They had a little chance of recovery here. They have a little chance of recovery here. So we have to deal with this. So let's see if we can do this. Okay. Yep. So it's similar to what we had before. So we're going to think about m time steps ago. We want the fraction of individuals who, regardless of whether they're infected or not, we want their dose count to have gone below. It was equal to their threshold and went below. It has to equal it, right? It can't drop, because it's just 1s and 0s. It can't drop like 10 in one go. It has to just drop 1. Your dose count can only go +1, 0, -1. All right. So we know that. So it was equal to it m time steps ago and has stayed below since. Okay. So if we have that, then the fraction that aren't recovered, we'll call it this thing, gamma. We'll put a gamma in there. So p is of course, our the tuning parameter of our system. We're at some fixed. We're looking for fixed points, so that's going to be in there. and then there's some other parameter, the recovery rate. So same as what we had before, we need this 1 minus r to the m. So this is a fraction whose dose threshold has been below, and they have a chance of recovering. This is the probability they didn't recover. Okay, it's very similar to what we did before. Okay, and so we can expand our fixed point equation in the same way. The fraction that are infected now are the ones that definitely have their thresholds exceeded, right? So these are this is the equation you get if you have no recovery or instant recovery, right? So these are the ones that have at least d star of their entries in their memory is ones. These are the ways to do it. These are the probabilities. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, and then we have to add this chunk. So this is a general statement, right? So this is going to be the fraction that they've recovered. I mean, sorry, their dose load is below their threshold. They have a chance of recovering. They have not. Okay, but we've defined it, right? So we've defined these to be they went below and they stayed below. We have to think about those guys. So we can talk about this in general terms. We'll do a very simple case, right? This should be easy, right? T equals 3, D star equals 2. That's fine, right? And then we'll have R, arbitrary R, right? So we solved this before. It gave us a tiny little squeaky bifurcation in the corner. Okay. So we expect, though, that when we let R drop below 1, that bifurcation should pull back. We should see that. Is that okay? Because, right, it's more, the thing stays, generally people stay infected more. Right. Okay. Okay. So we're going to solve this one exactly. Cool. Exact solutions are great. So we have to think about, and so they've just got three memory units. We have to think about how they could have dropped below 2 and stayed below 2 for the last m time steps. All right, so at most, so you're looking through their whole memory. They've got m now, which in principle can be 10 billion. If you look through it, you can never see two ones next to each other in this time where they've been able to recover but haven't, because that means there'll be 2 out of 3 in that little window. You couldn't have 2 1s and a 0 because they would have been infected for that little window. So you have to have at least 2 zeros breaking up 1s. I mean, this is very, we're going to solve this. We're just going to treat this particular problem, in an exact way. And maybe you could generalize it, but you probably should move on to a different problem. Okay, but this is going to be fun. It's rich and it's interesting. Okay, so how can this be the case? So first of all, we need that transition. So your dose at time n was 2. Dose at time n plus 1, your dose load is 1. So how can it drop, right? So here's n and n plus 1. These are your little doses. Well, you could have had 1, 1, 0, so you've got 2 out of 3. And now you get a 0, so now you've got 1 out of 3. Okay, that's 1. And then there's this as well, right? So it could be that you were 1, 0, 1, and then you got a 0. Yeah, because it has to stay below 2. Yeah, because we want them to stay below. So you're forced. So yes, you've dropped below it, but that's necessary, right? So for this one to work, this has to be true on the next time step. And then we can add all these other possible sequences. This is sort of, these kind of problems pop up everywhere, genetics or whatever. All sorts of ways of thinking about how to arrange things. That's what we're doing. How to arrange things. How you put your things in your kitchen, right? It's all the same combinatorics. These we can tack on how you arrange your file system. So we can tack on, sequences that will preserve this feature of being below this threshold of 2. Okay, so this is the statement, right? Yep. Okay. Right. So there's no other way we could have gotten to this, right? We had either had 2 1s in a row, or it could be 1, 0, 1. If there are any more zeros in there, we're already below. So this has to be the transitional thing. So there are only two ways to do it. So that's good. So we can count that, 1 and 2, that's good. And then we realized that this is the only way you could build the sequences that come afterwards to keep below, so that these partial random walk sums stay below 2. This is quite sweet, okay? So it actually has to be it can be any combination of these two subsequences, right? So you can have a 1, 0, 0, and then a 0. So you can throw in as many zeros as you want, that's good. And you can have a 1, 0, 0, but you can never have a 1, 0. If you had a 1, 0, you could put another 1, 0 next to it, and that would be bad. I mean, there may be different ways to think about this, but this is, yeah. Yep. It's really fun. StatMech, it's great. Okay, so you need to think about this a little bit. Like these is, right? So the only chocky thing, right? You can never have, right? This is no good, so it has to be all right. So you think, okay, I have to have at least 2 zeros. Then I can have as many zeros as you want. This can be. That's fine. And you have another 1. That's okay. But as soon as you get a 1, you need to have 0, 0. So this is a little block. And then you can have more zeros, more zeros, more zeros. Every time you get a 1, it necessitates a block. So that's it. So the block, so this thing, such that has the feature of any 3 consecutive entries sum to below 2, yep, has to be made out of blocks of 1, 0, 0, and 0. Okay? So you solve your problem. So you know, if you think about, whatever it is, d star equals 7 and t equals 12, you'd have to concentrate on that one too. Mm-hmm. But this is small, so we can do it. Okay, so we kind of have the big story in the middle, but there are little end bits and start bits that we have to be careful with. Okay, so bookkeeping. Great. But we know how they have to start. We know what the sort of insides have to be. Then we have to kind of glue these things on, and we have to count some things up. Okay. So we want to count the number of possible sequences, length m, that do this thing where we want the dose load to be below d star equals 2. So we'll say NA is the number of these little 0 blocks, NB is the number of these 1, 0, 0 blocks, and the length will be, well, the NA times 1, and B times 3. Okay. So that's how we can partition this guy. And we can have as many of either one, it's fine. So NB at most could be, this is the floor of m divided by 3. It could be, right? You could have tons of those blocks and then maybe a 0 to pad it, but it could be 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, right? So you put as many of those as you want. That's the limit. And of course it could, so that's just a possible max for that guy. The max for NA could be m, right, if it's all 0. And at the same time, so if there is 0 of the B blocks, then there must be m of the 1 blocks. Right? If there's 1 of the B blocks, then there has to be m minus 3 of the 0 blocks because they count for 3. So these guys go against each other. Being careful. Slightly insane. It's okay? Seen it before? All right, so how many ways do we arrange it? So given we have NAAs and MBBs. So we have some sequence of subsequences. So much fun. And right, so this is your first subsequence, your second one. Then there are NA plus MB total guys. Okay. That's how many slots we have. Right, there are NA of the A's, MB of the B's. And you can choose the positions of either one, right? So NA plus MB divided by, choose NA. That's how many places to put the A's. And NA plus B to choose NB. This is kind of nice, right? Now we're treating them as blocks. We're not worried about the fact that, these are length 3 anymore or anything like that. We can shuffle. Okay. So that's good. So we've counted that. So the total number of sequences of size m, so we can sum from MB equals to m divided by 3, the floor of that. So that gives us the whole thing. Yeah, and if you say k equals mb, right, so this is k equals this to this, k is here, and this is mb plus na. So this is, yeah, mb plus na is m. Yeah, so the total is m. Nope, that's not right. Yeah, it's because, right, 3 times mb plus na equals m. Right, and so we're going to just mb plus na. That's m minus, we can take this 2 off, mb. And so it's m minus 2k. I would just relabel it as k equals 0 to this. So that's how many ways we can do it. So wrong, sorry. But this is fun. All right, so we have this. And then we can think about the probability of each sequence. So the probability of the A one is just that you got a fail. Probability of the B one is that you had a success and then 2 fails. So that's their little probability. So we've got counting probability. Do this all the time. And we're just going to smush it all together. Okay. So we're going to call this one chi. So this is the probability of getting a sequence of length m that stayed below. Did the right thing. So it's going to have this piece with an m minus k and then a k here, right? And then this is the how many choices. Yeah. So we actually, now we have it. So we have it. We have to be a little careful about the ends because it might not exactly be, you know, m is some, you know, whatever it is, some number. There are only so many ways to put in blocks of 3 and 1s. So we have to clean up the ends a little bit, so we'll do that. Okay, yep. So we're going to say, so we have a random sequence of length DAB, of length m, and it's made out of A's and B's. Okay, good. So we're good? So we have to put it, to get to these real ones that we want, these are a bit special because they have a certain length to them. So we might have to add a little bit to the start of one of these or the end of it to make an arbitrary one. Okay. This is the last little bit here. So here are the 6 possible things. So we could okay, it's really funny. So this is going back in time. Sorry, this is okay. Yeah, it's going back in time. So we could have started with 1 1 0 0, and then we have one of these blocks. 1 1 0 0. We have one of these guys. And it ends in a 1. That's all right. That's going to be all right. Because it's okay if we put a 1 here. We don't have any zeros up. Right? The length of it is such that, so at the end of it, we can put some different kinds of blocks. Because we don't have any more length for it to mess up. So we're allowed to have some odd little blocks at the end. It could be a 1. It could be 1 0. Right. But they aren't counted. They aren't included in our A blocks and B blocks. Okay, so there's an exception there. There's another exception here where we put a 1 and a 0. Yep. Yeah, because you can't, because this guy was special. It is an A block. It is an A block, but it's just you've had to deviate from your clever plan. So you've had to, so it's better to just write explicitly what it is.
Okay, but I'm just like, there's not some probability attached to that last.
Oh yeah. So this is the same probability for getting a 0.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. It's just we have to write it down explicitly. This one we can, you know, we've covered all these guys in the middle. So these have different lengths, right? This is okay. So here's a case where there's m. It's a sequence of length m where it was below. So we want a sequence of length m minus 1 that does that. So that's fine. We could have a sequence of length m minus 2 does that using our thing with a 1 at the end. We know that works. We have a sequence of length m minus 3 with this 1 0 at the end. That works too. And it could be that started as 1 0 1 1 0 1 1 0 1 and then these 0 0 0s like this. That works too. Then we can plug on the same thing and it has those same possible endings. So 2 beginnings, and then each one has 3 endings. And we know what the probabilities of these things are, right? So you just write down explicitly what the probabilities are for the first parts, right? Then we write down our probabilities for the nasty things in the middle, these chi's. And we tack on the probabilities for these last parts as well. So this one will get an extra 1. This one gets a 1 and a 0. So you can see the index here, and the index is here and here, +1, +1. So this is somewhat crazy, but it's what you have to do. Yep. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So now it's, yeah. That's right. So this says d m minus 2 actually. Yeah. That's your length 0 there, 1. Yeah. M minus 2. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So great. Okay, so we can actually write this down, which is insane. So this was our general statement, right? We want our fixed point fraction is whatever where we deal with these guys that haven't recovered, and we just acknowledge the ones that never have a chance because their thresholds are being exceeded. That's all in that, right? So they're all sick. There's no way they can recover. These ones have had a chance and they have not recovered. And incredibly, in this case, for the t equals 3 case, d star equals 2 case, this is the horrible beast that we write down. Get it right. Yeah. 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 So, so crazy. This is, yeah, right. Sum equals m equals 1. This whole blob here, this is our normal kind of thing. And then we have all these different chi's sitting there, and we've got little prefactors to deal with the lengths changing and so on. Yeah, because some of these chi's combined, right? There's a chi m minus 2 here, another one here. These two match, right? So there's a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4. So actually you only end up with 4. So they've been grouped together. Yeah, completely sensible. Yeah, so that is this whole block in here. Yeah, really nasty. Yeah, and there's one extra crazy bit, which is if you can have a 1 0 1 0 sequence, which is just not counted for in any of this, right? So it just happened, right? There are some that have just gone into this state, and they've had one chance to recover, so they're not included. So it's bookkeeping, but there's this little piece at the start. So we have a formula for these chi's. So you can now put it into a thing, and you can get out your fixed points and your bifurcation diagrams. But you still don't get this. They're still all saddle nodes, right? So that's our original guy here, and this is for values r equals 0.01, 0.05, 0.1 out to 1, 1 being where we were before. But as we draw back, so you get a very low recovery rate of 0.01, then you're in this business here. So, beautiful. And we solved a very special little case. But, the end result is, okay, it does kind of what we want. It's fun to solve things completely. But then move on. All right. Yeah. This is actually, right, so there are simulations to get these values, and then simulations to match up with the, always good for them to lie exactly on the curve. And it has this thing too, right? So the fixed points here, and again, yeah. Coolness. Okay. Contagion, gone berserk. T equals 2, D star equals 2, you can do that as well. Another sort of thing. It actually has a slightly different feature, which is, okay, so here's a nice, interesting feature. So when r equals 1 for this one, nothing ever spreads, actually. Right, so this guy, we had this little this little bifurcation, there's some spreading is possible. But when recovery is 1 and we have a memory of 2, but this is D star equals 2. So you need to have both of your memory, you need to get 2 hits to be on. Right? Then you'll just recover. So it's just, it's a bad situation. If everyone's infected, you're fine. It is a fixed point. So it actually just kind of, is just swallowed up into this point here. But actually, even in this case, which doesn't work, for r equals 1, you can draw back, let r drop down. You can ridiculously figure out the point value of r for which you get something. But then it also expands out here. So that's a categorically kind of different thing as well. Okay, cool. So no spreading for r greater than this. If the recovery is too strong, the saddle node, it's not a saddle node anymore, right? Because it's hooked to this point. So it's just actually going to do this. It'll be gone. Mathematically, this thing goes over here, and there's no way to access it. Super duper. Yes. What was the line? Oh, yeah. This is nutritious. All right. Okay, so we really went deep into that one. It's good. So we got a continuous phase transition, which is this SIR type thing. We got a saddle node, which is threshold model-like. And generally, this is the story, right? So D star is 1 if you have a threshold of 1, and there are unit doses coming in. Small seeds can take off, right? That's the continuous phase transition. It's possible for small things to spread. As soon as you have the D star greater than 1, again, it's integers. You need 2 or 3 or 4. As soon as you need more hits, then we get into a critical mass model, and you need to seed the system, depending on what it is. It may or may not still be possible, but if you've got a saddle node bifurcation somewhere, there are places in this space for this model, or for the model parameters, for which it's a critical mass. Okay? They're very different things. Other behavior is possible, yes. And I have to say, in figuring this out, it very much was like this. Like we were like, okay, got this. It wasn't, I'm not sort of creating a story after the fact. There's this mystery. It's actually kind of how it worked out. All right, so natural thing to do is to, mess around with things a little more. So we can go to this is more real world like, of course. We're being pretty careful. Yeah, so with meaning, now we'll allow them to have some variance, okay? And in general, they could be arbitrary distributions. So it's going to look like I need to fix up that D command. It should be Roman. Okay, so these things emerge as being a big deal, right? So let's figure out what this is. So this is a probability that a randomly chosen character will be infected, right? So there's, you have to integrate over what's the probability that they have a threshold of size D star. That's the sample here. So you're sampling from that. And then what's the probability that their last, K samples, right? K samples exceed D star. Right? So this is you're choosing a node, and it's given K hits. You give it K hits. What's probably that exceeds its threshold? Okay. Words. Okay. So we're going to randomly get someone out, give them K doses, right? And K doses come from this distribution F. We've chosen, they'll have some threshold selected from G, and we give them K hits. What's the probability that they get infected? These turn out to be the key parameters. So if P1 gets back to our vulnerable story, right? So we're going to randomly choose someone, squirt, one dose into them that we randomly choose from this distribution, and then look at them to see if they got sick or not. It's not IRB approved. Okay, so and it will be the fraction of these most vulnerable individuals, right? It will correspond to that. So what's the fraction? So it connects back to that bigger story. Okay, let's see. Let's see. Yeah, so K is, so we're just thinking about, well, their memory, they have T memory points. Yeah, yeah, less than T. So we're interested in what happens. Yeah, so given you have T memory things, so what's the, and you've had K of them have been successful. So we'll put that on the next slide. But you've had K successful injections. What's the probability that you got infected? So then you can build this, right? Everything's enfolded into that. So all these extra complications, these more complicated distributions go into these P1, P2, P3, P4, P2. So just T numbers. So there's a collapsing of the details, right? But this looks like what we've had before, but the change is going to be, well, you can sum the fraction that are infected now in a fixed point situation or a stable situation. Well, you sum from K equals 1 to T. That's the number of hits you have. This is the probability that this is how many ways of arranging those positive doses. This piece here is the probability that all of those doses were in fact happened. The rest of them failed. And then this is the probability that those K doses infected you. You're a randomly chosen person. So there's a lot in that detail. But so you can actually play with this thing and do the same thing we did with the the much more simple thing. We can expand around phi star equals 0. Right, so this is, we'll get rid of everything except for K equals 1 will be here. Phi star is going to be good here. And then we have this guy we'll play around with as well. And I guess I could write it down. Right, so T choose 1 is just is T. That's our first bit. We have P phi star for K equals 1. And then what is it? Yeah, so this part here will be, right, so it's 1 minus P phi star. This is just the first part. Everything else is going to have a higher power of phi star, so can I get rid of those guys? This is going to be, right, so this will be this 1 minus P. We can put our T minus 1 piece in there. But this is going to be approximately 1. That's enough for our approximation here. We have P of 1 here, because K equals 1. And on this side, we have phi star. Okay, so this is going to be here, here, and we get this P1, so we get 1, P1. And this is the critical value of PC. And we know that if P is great, so P has to be, put this blob on there, so P has to be greater than this. And then we're on the side of the positive side of the phase transition. So so it's possible, okay, that's our critical thing. So you compute this P1 and this T. This guy might not be less, this blob here might be greater than 1. And if it is greater than 1, there's no transition, right? There's no simple transition where you go, okay. So this is sensible. All right, let's talk about some things here. So this is sensible for this reason. So P1T, so that's the expected number of vulnerables the initial infected person gets. They have T chances, and P1 was the, right, because it's random. It's random. So you start with one person, they're going to infect people. It's big, so they'll never get more than 2 hits in their history because the chance of that first person talking to them twice is very low. So the expected number that they get infected, well, they get T shots. Each time they're trying to get a vulnerable, essentially. So it's going to be P1 times T. That's the expected number of people that first person gets. And then it can take off from there. So again, this is like our R naught. If this is greater than 1, then it takes off, right? And if it's greater than 1, this quantity is less than 1. So it's available, right? So P can be greater than it. And P is the thing that balances out this recovery. Right, so there's this extra piece here. So P, and you think of it like this. P1T is the expected number that get a chance to be infected, and then P is the number that, if you multiply by P, that's the expected number that actually get a dose. Right? Yep. Yep. I mean, it could be like this. Little p times t, that's the expected number that are exposed, and then you multiply by P1 to get the fraction that are actually infected. I could change that a little. All right. This is very nice, very nice. So it turns out, right, so PC could be greater than 1. It still has a, it still hits this, right? It's not like this anymore. Here's 1. It's still somehow hitting this curve, but it's way over here, so it doesn't matter. It's impossible. This is P. Okay. All right, good. So we'll get as far as we can. I'll get you the big results and some extra pieces. But okay, so then we want to think about what's the slope. That's always a very important thing. What's the slope? In a lot of critical phenomena, it's actually an infinite slope here, and you look for how it's scaling. Right, it might be going like the square root of the classic thing is 1 over P minus PC to some power. Right, could be doing that. So it's coming off as 0. Say take a square root function, for example, right? Infinite slope, but it's a continuous thing with a discontinuous derivative at that point. All right. We're not going to see an infinite slope, but we're going to see some interesting things. So I won't do this calculation, but you take that, right? We take this guy. P2 is going to be involved now because we're looking at the slope. It's a more detailed thing. And if you do that, the slope depends essentially on this guy. The sign of it depends on P1 minus P2 over 2. Which I kind of feel like I need a beautiful story for. All right, so, yeah, okay. So behavior near the fixed point is this, actually, right? So it's, the slope is positive. You get P1. If P1 is greater than P2 over 2, it's a continuous phase transition. If it's less than that, you get a discontinuous phase transition because the slope is, in fact, it's going to look like this. So we actually do get a third weird kind of thing. So 3 universality classes, yeah, and steak knives. All right, so here's an example. We have dose sizes are log normally distributed, mean 1, some variance, memory of 10. Thresholds are going to be uniform, but they'll be 0.5, 1.6, and 3. So these are more resilient. This is one that it's easier to infect, and this is somewhere in between. It's really just that. So what I showed you before is that PK calculations. That's where F, the distribution for the dose sizes, and G, the distribution for the thresholds, just gets folded into those things. So they're 2, distributions. You end up with, in this case, 10 numbers: P1, P2, P3, P8, P10. That's it. So whatever those things, horrible things are, they get folded in for those guys. And so this is what you get. All we're changing is the threshold of individuals. They all have the same threshold, right? Everything else is the same. We're just changing the threshold. So we go from critical mass to what we call a vanishing critical mass to a true critical mass, right? Sorry, I said critical mass. Epidemic threshold to a Muppet. No, epidemic threshold type model, vanishing critical mass. So this is a transcritical bifurcation story, saddle node, with a transcritical bifurcation as well. So that's what happens. As this goes across, the transcritical bifurcation sneaks around, and the saddle node stays there. And then this is happening out here, and doesn't matter. It could go to infinity. That's fine, but it's off here. So this is now a critical mass type thing. But this is this is actually the most perilous situation. It's pretty bad, right? So if you have some system like this, so we kind of unearthed this, right? So you could be sneaking along here. It's all great. That's fine. Don't wash your hands. And then it takes a. Just listen to Bieber. It's all right. nothing bad. Yeah, smoke these things. Right, and then you won't get addicted. Why is everyone dead? Okay, so but you can see that there's a nasty thing, very nasty thing. Yeah, and so I guess I have a slide on this, but there's a hysteretic effect if somehow you can dial P and you're like, oh, maybe we should stop selling those things, right? Then you're here, and then it will go boom. Yep, hysteretic kind of behavior. Yeah. So, but yeah, nothing. You know, this is not great. You know, it's critical mass. You know, so if you get some true believers, all right, you get fair enough. Then everyone will join in. So it seems okay, but this is one where explodes into flames really badly. So this is steep here, but that's an artifact of this particular model. But this is continuous, meaning that as you cross that threshold, now you know, just as you cross it, oh, there's a fraction that start up. It ramps quickly, but it's continuous, right? Whereas here it's discontinuous and it's a nightmare scenario. Okay, so last 5 minutes we're going to just sort of wrap things up. These are the criteria. So epidemic threshold situation is your critical probability is less than 1, and then you have this balance here between the P1 and P2s. So that means that this slope is positive. If it's such that the critical probability is less than 1, right? So it's still in the game here. The slope is negative. Then we're in this vanishing critical mass model, and then well, it's necessarily true that the slope is going to be less than 1, but now the critical probability is out here, and you don't care where it is because now you have a gap. Coolness. So there are other possible things. This is, you know, it's harder to analyze, but if you allow R to be less than 1, which we kind of closed off for a while, but if you allow that recovery thing again, you get that same kind of thing. So we're actually dialing between those three models for one particular situation. This is a critical mass one. As we move that recovery rate down, then we actually go to a epidemic threshold model, and we pass through a vanishing critical mass one. So we can actually move through. So this previous one was we got through these by just switching. I mean, you could do it. You could say, okay, the thresholds of people, right? Everyone had the same threshold. The thresholds are different here. They're more resilient here. Another way to do it is to say everyone has the same threshold, but we're going to change their recovery rates. We'll dial through those guys as well. You know, and you do get this. The critical thing generalizes. It's not just P1 times T. You get that plus tau that we had before, which is that typical time of recovery. Very nice. And you can turn this around and say it's critical. The critical probability times P1 times the expected time of being sick give you those. Yeah, when that's about 1. That gives you PC. So that's cool. You can get other things. So yeah, you're allowed to have as many saddle nodes as you want. So some transcriticals. Yeah, how many do you want? Oh, you're right. So you can put them in. This is when individuals have. It's not a it's not a nice it's not a either uniform or a nice kind of distribution of thresholds. They're lumpy now. Right? You can imagine you can play around with this. So this is a situation where you get into all sorts of madness. The critical. I'm going to say there's still 3 classes: epidemic threshold here, vanishing critical mass, terror, and then critical mass here. Right. So it's about the small seeds. But as you move away from that, you get all sorts of madness. So, but this is now about so it's a heterogeneity in the thresholds. But yeah, this has got some weird behavior, right? So this would take off, and then it would be bad, and then it would come back. This would be bad. Go to here. It would again have a jump there. This one, if you start in here, it only gets to here. But if you start in here, it only gets to here. This is the hysteretic thing that I mentioned, right? So you can have this kind of wandering around if for somehow you can dial things. All right, so I think this is good. So this is kind of our nutshell. There are 3, in terms of things taking off, which is what we worry about, there are these 3 fundamental classes. and this has been brought about from this, very natural kind of question was, well, can we make a model? Can we kind of create a synthetic model that brings together these two fundamental types of spreading, right? Social-like and biological-like, which are themselves are made-up models, but could we put an umbrella model together? Very, very extreme things can happen. How do you adjust your model, right? What do you do? What's your public policy? Well, somehow you can. These are the things you can play with in principle: memory, recovery rates, how quickly people come back to being susceptible, P1 and P2, right? So what's the probability that people are vulnerable or take 2 hits? And then of course we have P, right? So we can adjust that as well. So for the model, right? Somehow we might be able to change that about the way things are being infected. There are lots of other crazy things, but this is really the key part in the end. Was this is when things take off, right? So, yep, contagion comes from a simple. So we have system memory, fraction of highly vulnerable. So it's a similar kind of story. It's never really been put on networks. Actually, this would be a good problem to put on certain kinds of networks, and we've thought about it. So it's another example where the vulnerables, right, can be the big problem. You think it's all about the influentials, but it's about everyone running around telling each other little stories about Justin Bieber. Hey, that's just a bonus for you right at the end. It's kind of nasty. Somehow this thing seems to have died. It killed this. So, okay, but I think that's all right. That's good. So this is really great. It's a great model. It's okay. This hasn't really been put on networks properly. Random networks and bipartite networks and also, just even the basic networks. You can think about it. There's some things that probably won't work straight away, but you could certainly complicate. You could put on some interesting. So you could see that there were some complications just for the simplest versions of this, for the mean field one. But no, it hasn't really been done properly on networks. Not that I know of. Maybe it has actually, but I don't think so. It's sort of fallen in. There's an element of it being in the citation box where social contagion is interesting. Citations 1 through 30. These papers get cited there. But so building on explicitly it's sitting around. I've thought about it. I think I've worried that it couldn't be done interestingly, but that can't be right. So anyway, there are other models around now that where you have multiple infections coming in. But this is adding memory. So we just took the simplest thing. We added memory. This is what we got. We got these 3 classes and universality classes, and that's a really profound result. So next time, so Tuesday we have you have an email to enjoy. If you have questions about it, please email me. I know many of you have your own. What's that? This is longer. You have. I should tweet about the email. So you have. Look at your email. Did you read it? Yeah. So there's that. So that will be next Tuesday, and they'll be here. And so it's many of you have done POCs, for a couple of you, so you know the drill. What's that? Same as POCs. I can talk to you if you have not. But the idea is just give 5 minutes, just talk about your problem. Many of you have problems already. If you don't, we can. Projects. Many of you have projects already. If you don't, you can talk to me. I have a whole slew of them to think about. All right, so great. And then, of course, we have until May. So you have 5-6 weeks to.
Wait, can we talk about the date that we're presenting this actually? Yeah, but can we change it?
Well, you could. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, we could move it. We could put it at Farrell. We could put it at Farrell Hall. We could move that. We'll video it. Why? What do you do? You plan to be in
No, I haven't planned it yet.
Costa Rica or something? All right. So no, and that happens for various reasons, and I don't know what your legal status is, but I understand. And Argentina is good, actually. That's where most of my family is. So right. So yeah, we can do that, and so, in some we can have one person. You know, right.
We could be awesome and just do it before final.
The idea is,
You have nothing else. Be quiet.
well, the idea is so you can probably try to get towards a paper. Now, this something can go into the summer as well, and many of you are working on projects that are long term anyway. So it'll be nice. Yeah, by the end of the summer, if it's going to be a paper, it would be great to close it out. So yeah. It's a summer of research. All right, team. Well done. Excellent work.
Yeah.
Everyone is alive.